The first time someone called me sir, I almost didn't respond. I was standing in a pure gold supermarket in Dumaguete, reaching for a bottle of water, and this guy, couldn't have been more than 20, just said, "Sir, do you need help?" And I'm from Asheville. Nobody says sir in Asheville unless you're at a funeral or someone's really mad. But here I was, 48 years old, 3 years into what I thought was going to be a 6-month experiment, being called sir by strangers who genuinely seemed to mean it. That's the moment I think I finally understood why I've been living in the Philippines, instead of literally anywhere else on the planet. Look, I've been to 43 countries. I'm not saying that to brag. Honestly, the number kind of snuck up on me. It wasn't like I had a list on my fridge or anything. I was a freelance developer and the timing just worked out. Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Central America, North Africa. I spent 6 months in Tbilisi, Georgia. That's a beautiful country. I had a girlfriend there for a while, learned some Georgian, got obsessed with khachapuri. But then the cost of living started creeping up, and I realized I didn't actually know anyone outside of that tiny expat bubble. Then I did 3 months in Medellin. Everyone's always talking about Medellin, the transformation, the energy, the perpetual spring weather. And it's all true. The city is incredible. But after a while, I realized I was experiencing it the same way I might experience a really engaging Netflix series. I'd watch something cool, take some photos, maybe feel this little rush of being somewhere exotic, and then go back to my apartment and work on my laptop like I could be anywhere. The city was amazing. I just wasn't really in it, you know? I tried Chiang Mai for a year, probably my longest stretch before the Philippines. It's cheap, the food's unbelievable, and there's this whole infrastructure built around digital nomads. You've got co-working spaces with names like the Pun Space or whatever, and everyone's always talking about their location independence journey. But, and I don't want to sound harsh because I genuinely enjoyed it, there's also this strange distance that happens. You're surrounded by thousands of other expats, all of you essentially going through the same checklist. Try the street food, haggle at the night market, take a trip to the islands, maybe volunteer at an elephant sanctuary if you're feeling like you need meaning that month. And the Thai people are beautiful and gracious, but you're always kind of on the outside. I also spent time in Lisbon, which is where I started to realize something was broken in my whole approach to this. Lisbon is gorgeous. The yellow trams, the azulejo tiles, the pastéis de nata, all of it stunning. I loved the city. But I was there for 2 months and I was miserable. Not because of Lisbon, but because I was watching myself travel. I'd take a photo at a viewpoint and think about the caption before I'd really looked at the view. I'd go to a restaurant and wonder if it was Instagram worthy instead of just eating the food. I made friends with other Americans in Lisbon, and we'd sit around talking about the next place we were going, not really present in the place we were. And one night I went to this fado club. Fado is this sad, beautiful Portuguese music. And I was sitting there listening to someone sing about longing and heartbreak, and I realized I was just collecting the experience. I was a tourist of my own life. The music was gorgeous, and I wasn't actually hearing it. The Philippines is different, and I didn't expect it to be. I came here in April 2021, originally planning to stay for 2 months. I know, famous last words, right? But I was burned out. I'd been in Georgia and then bouncing around Thailand and Vietnam, and honestly, I was getting tired of the logistics. Visas, travel, setting up new routines every time I moved, making friends who were always about to leave. My cousin lived in Iloilo at the time, married a Filipino woman, had a kid, and he said, "Just come here for a bit, take a break. It's easy, and it's cheap." Dumaguete wasn't even the plan. I was supposed to go to Iloilo to stay with him. But my flight got rerouted. This was during COVID stuff, things were weird, and I ended up in Cebu first. And while I was there, someone said, "Hey, if you want somewhere quiet and nice, go to Dumaguete. It's like 3 hours away." So I did, and I basically never left. Dumaguete is small, maybe 100,000 people, not counting the surrounding areas. It's on Negros Oriental, in the Visayas region. But here's the thing about Dumaguete, it's not trying to impress you. There's no nightlife in the way people mean it when they talk about Southeast Asian cities. The Riverwalk, that's the main area, has some restaurants and bars, and yeah, you'll see tourists, but it's not Patpong or anything. Most nights I'm just having dinner and sitting there watching the Bohol Strait, drinking San Miguel, watching Filipino families out for Sunday dinner. You can walk it in about 15 minutes. On weekends there's usually a market. Across the strait, you can see Bohol. That's not poetic fluff. You legitimately can see another island from where you're standing. My first experience with how fragile things are here came during the monsoon season about 6 months in. I remember it was a Thursday, and there was this feeling in the air. Everyone was being quieter, moving a bit faster. My landlord Rudy came by and asked if I had candles and water and a flashlight. I said yeah, mostly joking. By that night, the rain was horizontal. I'm talking about rain that sounded like someone was throwing gravel at the windows. The power went out around 7 p.m. and I could hear it pop, just this little electrical sound, and then darkness. No backup generator, no flickering lights, just complete darkness except for the lightning that was so bright it was almost white. I lit some candles and just sat there in my apartment, listening to the storm. You could smell the generator diesel from 3 buildings over, where some people had them running. Outside, I could hear my neighbors. There were probably 30 or 40 people in the complex, and they were just out in the walkways, sitting under the covered areas, talking and laughing like it was a normal evening. Someone had battery-powered speakers and was playing Filipino music. Nanay Luz from 2 doors down brought out a pot of something warm, and people were eating and just existing together in the storm. I went out and just sat with them for a while. Nobody had phones charging anymore. Nobody was checking their email. There was no internet. We just sat there, talked. I remember someone explained to me that this happened maybe once or twice a year, and the power usually came back by morning. There was this incredible calmness about it all. It was dark and warm and loud with wind and rain, and people were making jokes. One of the guys, Tonio, was doing impressions of tourists freaking out about the weather, and everyone was just cracking up. The power came back around midnight. I went to bed feeling like I'd experienced something true about what it meant to live here. This balance between annoyance and acceptance, between the inconvenience of infrastructure and the incredible strength of community that actually made you feel like everything was going to be fine. The experience stayed with me, and I understood that settling here meant learning to find rhythm in a place where not everything is controlled or predictable. I'm a morning person, and I discovered this routine that became the spine of my weeks. Sunday mornings, I'd wake up early and take a tricycle to Silvertip Coffee. Silvertip is on the Riverwalk, a small place with a counter and maybe 5 tables, quiet on Sunday mornings. The owner is Linda, and she started knowing my order before I said it: black coffee, medium, and whatever pastry was fresh. The tricycle driver who takes me there, Roy, knows the route so well he barely needs me to say where I'm going. He grins and says, "Silvertip, Marcus?" And we drive through early morning streets while the city's still waking up. There's this specific light to Sunday mornings in Dumaguete, a golden hour that lasts longer than you'd think, and you can actually feel the day before the heat hits. I'd sit with my coffee, watching the Bohol Strait turn different shades of blue, usually alone with 1 or 2 other people. It became this small, sacred thing, not religious, just necessary, a moment that belonged to me. Roy always knew to pick me up at the same time, without me having to call. He just appeared around 9 a.m., smiled, and said, "Home, Marcus?" It's a tiny thing, but it's the kind of tiny thing that made Dumaguete feel like a real place, not just a location I was passing through. When I first got here, I rented a small apartment in Banawa. That's a barangay, basically a neighborhood, for about $150 a month. It was a 2-bedroom converted from someone's garage, not fancy. But it had Wi-Fi that worked most of the time, a washing machine, and air conditioning. The Wi-Fi was actually a bigger deal than it sounds because I work remotely. I'm a back-end developer, so I'm in calls with teams on the East Coast, and getting decent internet in a cheap place is like trying to find a unicorn in most of Southeast Asia. Dumaguete's internet is okay, not great. I've had brownouts that knocked out my connection right during client calls. I've had stretches where the Wi-Fi was so bad I was tethering to my phone's data plan. My first monsoon season, we had 3 straight days of power outages, and I just sat in my apartment reading books, texting my team that I'd be offline. They were cool about it. When you work for startups and remote companies, people understand that living in the Philippines means sometimes you're just not going to have power. The thing that made it work, though, is that almost everyone in the Philippines speaks English. Not everyone. There are people in the rural areas who don't speak it, and Dumaguete has a lot of regional languages like Cebuano. But in the city, at the grocery store, at restaurants, at the bank, English. I didn't have to learn Tagalog. I wanted to, actually. I learned some basics, enough to be polite and order food and chat a little, but I didn't need to. That's actually rare for Southeast Asia. Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, you're kind of expected to make an effort with the language, or at least the experience is much nicer if you do. But the Philippines was colonized by America for a long time, and English is just woven into the fabric. My landlord spoke English. The guy who fixes motorbikes behind my building speaks English. The jeepney drivers know enough English to understand where you're going. I have this guy, Ringo, who runs a little sari-sari store on the corner near my building. Sari-sari stores are these tiny neighborhood shops, basically somebody's front window, where you can buy anything from batteries to shampoo to cigarettes to instant noodles. Ringo's is my go-to, and he knows my order now. If I go in and don't say anything, he'll just hand me my coffee and my usual snack without me asking. But what got me is that the first time I ever came in, I was trying to ask for something and getting the pronunciation wrong, and instead of just correcting me, he spent like 5 minutes just chatting, asking where I was from, how long I'd been here, was I settling okay? There was zero transaction about it, just a genuine human conversation with someone I'd never met. And then every time I came back, he'd ask about my day, tell me about his family, we'd just talk. One day he told me he had a son in Manila trying to work as an engineer, and he was really proud but also worried about money. I listened. That's it, I just listened. And now when I come in, there's this ease to it that feels like friendship, even though we're technically just a shopkeeper and a customer. Speaking of jeepneys, those are the little minibus things, right? The colorful ones that are basically the backbone of transportation in the Philippines. You've probably seen them in photos. They're chaotic and fun, and they break down constantly. My first week in Dumaguete, I took one to Carbon Market. That's the main market here. And I genuinely couldn't figure out how to get off. I was just sitting there while people got on and off, trying to time my exit. And eventually the driver just kind of pointed outside and said, "Sir, your stop." And everyone waited while I figured out how to stand up without hitting my head on the ceiling. It's a thing. The ceilings are low. I must have taken 50 jeepney rides before I stopped thinking about it. Now I just automatically duck and know where to stand and can navigate the whole experience without making a fool of myself. But that first month was humbling. There's something about not knowing the basic rules of transportation in a place that really drives home that you don't belong yet. One of those early lessons came during a holiday weekend when I needed cash. I went to BDO, Banco de Oro, on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend. I was maybe 2 months in and feeling confident. I walked up to the ATM and it was just dead. Not broken like it says on the screen, just completely dark. There was a line of 20 people behind me and I slunk away. The next ATM was also out of service. I was standing there panicking. It was 4:30 p.m. and the bank closes at 3:30 on Friday. A woman, probably in her 60s, tapped my shoulder and said, "Hilom ka, sir. Try the one in the mall, 2 blocks that way." She just pointed, not impatient, just wanting to help because it was clear I was lost. So I went to the mall, found a working ATM, got my cash. But what got me was the kindness. This stranger seeing I was confused and solving it for me without making me feel stupid. That became a pattern I'd notice over and over. People would see I was struggling, and instead of being annoyed, they'd just help. There was this baseline assumption that if someone's confused, you help them figure it out. Different from the American thing where you're expected to know how everything works. Here, there's acceptance that you might not know, and that's okay, and someone will show you. I think a lot of the expat experience in places like Thailand or Vietnam is built on a certain kind of distance. You're a tourist with a visa that lets you stay longer. You have money compared to the local population, which is great and also weird. You're exotic because you're foreign. There's this inherent power dynamic that keeps you in a particular lane. You're always kind of an attraction, a guest, even if you stay for years. But the Philippines, and maybe this is just Dumaguete, or maybe it's just my particular experience, felt different pretty quickly. Like literally the first month I was here, my upstairs neighbor Maria invited me over for dinner. She didn't know me. I was just the American guy who moved into the apartment downstairs. She made this incredible sinigang. That's a tamarind stew, really rich and salty, with pork and vegetables. And she had her family over, and she just included me. And she did it in the way you'd include an actual neighbor, not like, "Look at this interesting foreigner, let's make him part of our exhibit." By the second month, I knew people at the coffee shop where I worked most mornings. By the third month, I had a crew of guys I'd play basketball with at the local court. By the fourth month, people were calling me just to hang out and grab food, not to practice their English, or because they thought I was some kind of opportunity. The basketball court became one of my favorite places, just a concrete court behind the university with a loose hoop and a net held together by hope. Every evening around 5, this group would show up, and I got invited in. There's Boye, probably in his 50s, who can shoot threes better than anyone there. Kuya Reggie, explosive energy, trash-talking constantly. Junjun takes it seriously but makes fun of everyone equally. The rules are loose, teams never quite even, and half the fun is banter. They destroyed me those first weeks. I'm not good, and they've played pickup ball their whole lives with real skill. Boye would grin and say, "Marcus, you play like old man." Reggie would say, "Sir, the basket is that way," pointing behind me. But there was no meanness. Making fun of someone is how you know them there. If they were just polite, I'd still be an outsider. The teasing meant I was in. They mimicked my accent after I'd say something like, "Nice shot," drawing it out like 1950s suburban America. I did accents back at them, exaggerating their Cebuano rhythm, and we'd crack up. Eventually, I got decent enough to hold my own, and by month 6, Reggie cursed me out like everyone else, which felt like winning. We'd play until dark, then sit on the curb outside a small store drinking San Miguel, talking about everything. Boyette about his son in Dubai, Junjun about dating, Reggie about high school basketball, just normal guy stuff. It was the first time in my traveling life where I was part of a group that actually played together, had inside jokes. Community in the truest sense, and it happened because I was willing to look stupid for a few weeks. Maria's invitation opened something else, too. After that dinner, I realized there was this whole social language I didn't understand. Like, the first time one of Maria's cousins called me over to eat, I showed up at the exact time she'd mentioned. But she wasn't ready. She was still cooking. I was early, or she was late. I genuinely couldn't figure out which. But she wasn't flustered about it. She just said, "Tito, come in, help me." And I stood in the kitchen while she finished preparing food, and we just talked. That happened every time after that. The stated time and the actual time were never quite the same. And I realized that was just how things worked. Time was more fluid here. It wasn't disrespect. It was just a different way of moving through the world. You showed up, you helped, you ate together. You didn't stress about the exact minute on the clock. And the Tito thing, that was huge for me to understand. Maria's cousins, her younger neighbors, kids I'd see around the barangay, they all started calling me Tito Marcus without me even noticing when it happened. It's a term of affection and respect. It's what you call a beloved uncle or aunt. So when someone I just met started calling me Tito, it actually meant they'd already decided I was part of the extended family. Once you realize that, everything shifts. You're not an outsider anymore. You're family. That's a different thing. I'm not saying the Philippines is free of the weird expat dynamics. There are definitely girly bars in some places. There's definitely a segment of Western guys here who are hunting for something unsavory. There's definitely economic disparity that creates uncomfortable power dynamics. But Dumaguete doesn't have a huge expat community. Maybe a few hundred retired people, some teachers, a handful of digital nomads. So you can't really hide in an expat bubble if you wanted to. You have to actually integrate. The cost of living thing is real, though. I've seen estimates that say you can live in Dumaguete on $500 a month if you're careful. That's absolutely true. I can get a full meal, like a substantial meal, some version of rice and a protein and some vegetables, for about $2 or $3 if I'm eating local food at a small warung or cafeteria. A beer costs about 50 cents to $1. My current apartment, which is bigger than the first one, has a balcony and is in a slightly nicer area, is $280 a month. That's roughly 15,000 pesos if you're doing the mental conversion. But here's the thing. I don't live on $500 a month, and I don't think most digital nomads do. My life in Dumaguete looks like this, and this is helpful if you're actually considering this, I think. My rent is $280. Internet is about $50 for a decent home Wi-Fi plan, which is non-negotiable for me because I work. Groceries, I spend maybe $200 a month if I'm cooking at home, which I do maybe 3 days a week. The other days I'm eating out, and that's probably $150 to $200 a month. So food and rent together, I'm at about $630. Then there's drinking, maybe $50 to $100 a month because beers are cheap, but I'm not getting drunk every night. Motorbike. I bought a used Honda Click for about $800 and spend maybe $30 a month on gas. Occasional clothes, maybe $40 a month. Phone plan is like $5. Going back to the States to visit family, that's the big one. I'm probably spending $1,500 a year on flights. So amortized, that's maybe $125 a month. So I'm looking at about $1,200 to $1,300 a month to live comfortably in Dumaguete. That's not cheap, but it's not expensive either, especially compared to where I'd be living in the States. I have a nice place, I eat well, I can travel around the Philippines on weekends, I can afford to go out whenever I want. And I'm making enough as a developer that this feels easy. The healthcare system here is kind of fascinating. It's not great, but it's functional. And it's really, really cheap. I got dengue fever about 2 years ago, kind of a miserable experience, not going to sugarcoat it, and I went to a private hospital, spent like 3 days getting IV fluids and blood tests. The whole thing cost me about $400. The quality was fine, they were competent. It was just surreal coming from the American healthcare system, where that would be $8,000 and you'd still owe your life savings to a collection agency. When I needed some dental work done, I went to this clinic called Riverside Dental, right off Rizal Boulevard. The dentist's name is Dr. Santos, and she's one of those people who's so calm and kind that you immediately feel stupid for being nervous. My receptionist, this woman named Ria, remembers everyone's name, their kids' names, their jobs. She'll ask you how your day was while you're checking in. I went in for a cleaning and an exam, and Dr. Santos found that I needed a crown on one of my back teeth. She explained the whole process, showed me the tooth on a little camera, walked me through what she was going to do, answered every question I had. The crown cost $120. In the States, that would be easily $1,200 to $1,500. She did meticulous work. It's held up perfectly for 2 years. I went back for a cleaning a few months ago, and Ria knew exactly where I liked to sit and what size bib to get before I even said anything. That whole appointment, exam, cleaning, small filling on another tooth, was about $40 total. When you're used to American dental care, where you basically take out a small loan every time you need a cleaning, that's surreal. I also got into a minor motorbike accident about a year in. Nothing serious. I took a corner too fast after it rained. The bike slipped. I went down. Scraped up my shoulder and leg pretty bad, but nothing broken. Went to the local hospital, got cleaned up, got some antibiotics. The doctor was this incredibly kind older woman who spent like an hour just making sure I was okay. Cost was maybe $80. I still see her sometimes around town. She always asks me how my shoulder is. That's the thing. You build these little networks of people, and they weave together in ways you don't expect. The doctor knows the dentist, who knows my neighbor, who knows the guy at the Sorry Sorry store. Dumaguete is small enough that everyone is 2 degrees of separation from everyone else. And once you've been around long enough, you start showing up in those degrees yourself. I've thought a lot about which moments actually made me feel rooted here, and one of them was my first Christmas. Christmas in the Philippines is different, like fundamentally different. They start celebrating in September, the Burr months, they call them, because September, October, November, December all end in Burr. By October, the Christmas songs are playing in every grocery store. By November, there are paroles, those star-shaped lanterns made from capiz shell or colored cellophane, hanging from every house. By the time actual Christmas rolls around, the whole place has been emotionally building toward it for 4 months. My first Noche Buena, that's Christmas Eve dinner, which is the main event, Maria invited me. I almost said no. I had been planning to just FaceTime my mom in Asheville, eat some leftover pancit, watch a movie. But Maria said, "Tito Marcus, you cannot eat alone on Noche Buena. That is impossible." She said it like it was a law of physics, so I went. Her apartment was packed, maybe 25 people. Cousins, kids, neighbors, an old tita whose connection to the family I never quite figured out. There was lechon, roasted whole pig, the centerpiece of any real Filipino feast, with skin so crisp it shattered when you cut it. Pancit palabok with shrimp and crushed chicharron, some kind of macaroni salad with too much mayo and pineapple, a fish and vegetable thing called pinakbet, hamonado ham swimming in pineapple juice, queso de bola wrapped in red wax, drinks everywhere, tanduay rum, San Miguel, mango juice for the kids. And it wasn't just the food, it was the atmosphere. Kids running everywhere, Tita Lourdes, Maria's aunt, coming over to pinch my cheek and tell me I was too thin. The cousins teaching me how to make a parole from scratch with bamboo sticks and Japanese paper. Someone put on a karaoke machine. Of course there was karaoke. And Maria's husband Boyong, who'd been quiet most of the night, stood up and absolutely destroyed a Filipino love song from the 80s. The whole room sang along, every word. Then they made me sing. I tried Hotel California. Every Filipino karaoke machine has it, and it felt like a safe choice. I was bad, really bad. But everyone cheered like I'd nailed it, and somebody handed me another beer. Kuya Reggie was there. He'd come from the basketball crew because of course he was friends with Maria's cousin's husband. That's how Dumaguete works. And he was filming the whole thing on his phone, threatening to post it to the group chat. He absolutely did post it. The teasing went on for weeks. Around midnight, everyone went outside for the church bells. Maria's family is religious, and even though I'm not, you stand outside in this warm December night, listening to bells from a dozen churches across the city ringing for midnight mass, and there's something in it that gets you, even me. The kids were exhausted by then, half asleep on parents' shoulders. People hugged each other and said, Maligayang Pasko, Merry Christmas. Maria gave me a small wrapped gift, a leather bracelet a craftsman in Siquijor had made. I hadn't brought anything for her. I tried to apologize and she just waved it off. You came, that is the gift. I called my mom afterward, told her about it, and she cried a little. Not sad cried, the other kind. She said, I'm glad you have people there, Marcus. That sat with me for weeks. After Christmas, there was the New Year fiesta in the barangay, with fireworks that were probably illegal and definitely too close to people's houses. Then in late January, there was Sinulog up in Cebu, this massive street dance celebration. I went up with the basketball guys. We stayed in a cheap hotel that smelled like detergent and cigarettes, danced badly to drum lines for what felt like 8 hours, and came back to Dumaguete sunburned and exhausted and still slightly drunk. Then Holy Week, which is intense and quiet. Everything closes, people fast, you go to procession after procession, the streets full of people walking behind statues of saints. Then the patron saint fiesta in our barangay around April, where every house puts food on a table out front and you're expected to eat at every single one, and you basically can't say no without offending someone. I got sick the first year because I tried to say yes to everyone. I'm smarter now. I take a few bites at each, give compliments, move on. The Lola at the corner makes the best biko, sweet sticky rice, and I always make sure to actually finish a piece of hers because she watches. These are the things you don't know are going to matter when you move somewhere. The calendar of the year fills up with these small communal events, and you start to feel time differently because of them. It stops being the third week of June, Q2 deadline coming. It becomes the week before the Fiesta of San Roque. I should pick up paroles at the market before they sell out. My time started running on a Filipino calendar without me noticing, and that's a kind of belonging that's hard to fake. One of my favorite escapes from Dumaguete is actually just a short trip north to Apo Island. It's this tiny island off the coast. You get there by tricycle and then outrigger boat. Takes maybe 45 minutes total. It's got some of the best snorkeling and diving you can find, and it's barely been commercialized. You go out there and there's maybe a handful of tourists on any given day. I went for the first time maybe a year in, and I got my dive certification while I was there. The instructor was this Filipino guy named Jojo who was patient and funny and clearly lived for being in the water. I did my certification dives there, saw things I'd never seen before, turtles the size of a car, reef sharks that were just doing their thing, schools of fish so dense it was like being inside a living kaleidoscope. But what got me was that I could just go back on the weekend. It wasn't this special trip you save up for. It was just an island 2 hours away that I could visit on a Saturday, spend the night, dive again Sunday, and be back by dinner. That kind of easy access to something that beautiful changed how I see the place. One thing I never thought I'd do is actually try to speak Cebuano. English gets you through Dumaguete, and it was just easier to not bother. Except one morning I was at a bread stand, maybe 2 months in, and the woman running it, an older Lola named Esther, was there every morning with pandesal and ensaymada. I had been pointing at what I wanted, very transactional, but one morning I must have looked lost, and she rattled off prices in Cebuano. I understood zero of it, so I tried Macano, how much, completely butchering the pronunciation. Esther erupted. She called another vendor over, and they were both losing it. But it wasn't mean. It was the kind of laughing where someone's trying so hard that it's endearing. After that, every time I came by, she'd greet me mimicking my pronunciation, and we'd laugh. I started actually trying. I learned Salamat kaayo, thank you very much, and practiced until I could say it right. The day I finally did, Esther's face lit up. She called Lolo over. Listen, listen. And they both gave me a look like I'd solved a riddle. She started teaching me other words. Adios, good morning. Mayong gabi, good evening. Suddenly the whole transaction felt different. I wasn't just a guy buying bread. I was Tito Marcus who was trying. She'd save the best pandesal for me, ask if I was eating well, if I'd studied my Cebuano. The language thing opened that door. It made me realize that people here want to help you fit in. You just have to show you're willing to try. The visa stuff is kind of a pain. Americans get a 30-day visa on arrival, and then you can extend it for another 30 days through immigration. After that, you need a longer-term visa, and the options are kind of limited. The most common is the SRRV, that's a retirement visa. But you need to be 50 years old or have $20,000 in a bank account, or $10,000 if you're retired, something like that. I'm 48, so I've got another couple years before I can get the retirement visa. In the meantime, I've been doing these visa runs. I'll go to Cebu or somewhere and do a tourist visa extension every couple of months. It's not complicated, just a bit of a hassle. There's also the ACR I-card, which is basically just a resident card, and it costs like $30 for a year. So I do that to have something official. It's not my favorite bureaucracy. The immigration office is kind of a mess, and you sometimes have to go multiple times to get something processed. But it's manageable, and honestly, it's part of living here. I'm not a citizen, I'm a guest on an extended visa. That's fine with me. The thing is, I've thought about whether I actually want to stay here long term, and the honest answer is yeah, I probably do. Not because I'm running from anything or chasing some fantasy. I've done enough traveling to know that nowhere is perfect, and the Philippines definitely isn't. It's hot, like really hot. Dumaguete is on the coast, so you get a little bit of a breeze, but during peak summer, April and May, it's just brutal. The sun is intense. Everyone moves slower. You sweat through clothes constantly. Air conditioning is not a luxury. It's a necessity for sleeping at night. And there's infrastructure stuff that's just frustrating. The power goes out occasionally, the internet can be terrible. The traffic in Cebu City is absolutely maddening. I went there last month to meet a friend, and what should have been a 20-minute ride took 2 hours. I was just sitting in a jeepney, stuck in gridlock, thinking about how this is the trade-off for living in a developing country. You get cheaper living and a slower pace, but you also get power outages and traffic jams that don't really exist in the States. Government bureaucracy is slow, like genuinely slow. I've been trying to get something sorted with the BIR, the Bureau of Internal Revenue, for my visa stuff, and it's taken like 6 months of going back and forth. It's not corruption exactly, just slow. Everything moves at this pace that's hard to describe until you've experienced it. You get used to it, but it's definitely frustrating when you need something done quickly. And then there's the thing that nobody talks about until you're here, which is the transportation beyond Dumaguete. Like, I love the Philippines, but getting around the country is legitimately hard if you don't plan properly. Flights within the country are expensive compared to the cost of living. The bus system is extensive, but not super comfortable. Those overnight buses where you're packed in with 40 other people, someone's chicken is loose in the aisle, and the driver's asleep. I've done it, and it's an experience, but it's not pleasant. There are ferries to the islands, which is amazing for island hopping, but the schedules are unpredictable and sometimes they cancel because of weather. So you can't just spontaneously go to Boracay or Palawan like you might think. It requires planning. But here's the thing, and I think this is why I've stayed. None of that stuff bothers me as much as it would have bothered me in the States. Like, if my power went out in Nashville, I'd be genuinely upset. I'd be like, this is an emergency, someone needs to fix this. Here, I just kind of deal with it. You learn what to do. You charge your devices before it happens. You get candles. You read a book. You go sit on the Riverwalk and have a drink with a friend. It's annoying, but it's not the end of the world. The heat is annoying, but there's something nice about a climate where you don't need a jacket. You don't need winter. You just dress for hot, all the time. Your life gets simpler in some weird way. And the people here, I keep coming back to this because it's the thing that made me stay, are just genuinely kind. I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I mean that in a day-to-day, actual way. When I first moved to my apartment in Banawa, one of my neighbors, this guy named Rodell, came over and helped me set up my Wi-Fi. I didn't ask. He just saw that I was struggling and helped. And then a few days later, his wife brought me food. And then he started inviting me to play basketball. That's just normal? That's just what neighbors do. I think in the States, if I moved to a new apartment, I might meet one person and then never talk to them again. Here, you're automatically connected to people. It's not transactional. Nobody's keeping score or wondering if they're going to get something out of it. I think about the 43 countries and what I was looking for in each one. I was young when I started traveling, or younger anyway. In my 30s, I had this idea that I needed to see everything, experience everything, build a narrative about myself as someone who had really lived. I'd go to a place, I'd have intense experiences, I'd meet people, I'd feel like I was doing something meaningful. But there's a specific kind of emptiness to that if you never actually settle. It's like you're moving through the world, but you're never really in it. I'd tell people about Tbilisi and they'd be impressed. I'd post pictures from Medellin and people would think I was cool. I'd talk about my 6 months in Chiang Mai and there's this validation in that. But at the end of the day, I wasn't building anything. I wasn't part of a community. I wasn't connected to anything real. The Philippines, and Dumaguete specifically, finally felt like the place where I could stop moving. Not because I got tired of traveling, but because I found something worth staying for. The people here are a huge part of it, but it's also the structure of life. I wake up, I go to Silvertip, I work for a few hours, I'll meet someone for lunch. Maybe it's one of my basketball friends. Maybe it's Maria. Maybe it's Nane Rose asking if I want to eat at her restaurant. I work some more in the afternoon. Sometimes I'll take a jeepney to somewhere nearby just to explore. I'll cook at home maybe 3 days a week, making things like sinigang or sisig, trying to recreate the food I've had out, mostly failing, but improving. I'll go out at night, have some beers at a bar on the Riverwalk, watch the sunset over the strait. It's normal, it's not exotic, but it's good. I think if you're considering doing this, and I know some people listening might actually be thinking about moving somewhere abroad, maybe to the Philippines, you need to understand what you're actually looking for. Are you running away from something or running towards something? Because those are different things, and they matter. I was a little bit of both. I was burned out on the rat race thing. I'd been working for tech companies, and there's a particular kind of stress that comes with that. The constant grinding, the meeting culture, the pressure to always be optimizing. And I was also running toward the idea of freedom, of being able to work from anywhere, of building a life on my own terms. The Philippines worked for me because it actually delivered on both of those things. I escaped the rat race, and I also found an actual life, not just a version of myself constantly performing the role of the American expat. But I'll be honest about the things that wouldn't work for everyone. The healthcare system is functional but not sophisticated. If I had a serious illness that required specialized surgery or something, I'd probably go back to the States. The education system is not great if you have kids. A lot of expats send their kids to private international schools, which are expensive. The internet is genuinely inconsistent, which is difficult if you need reliable bandwidth. The weather is tropical and can be brutal. There are typhoons. I've been through a few. They're scary. They cause real damage. It's not fun. And there's also the economic disparity thing. I have a lot more money than most people around me. That's a weird dynamic to navigate. You can't just pretend it's not there. I've thought a lot about what my responsibility is as a relatively wealthy person, living in a place where a lot of people are living on a few dollars a day. I try to be conscious about it. I pay fair prices, I tip well, I try not to be an asshole about my relative privilege. But it's definitely something to reckon with. I also miss things from the States. I miss good cheese. Like genuinely good cheese. You can get some cheese here, but it's expensive and not great. I miss craft beer culture. You can get beer here, but it's limited and not particularly adventurous. I miss the ease of certain infrastructure. I miss my family, and I do go back every year or so to visit, but there's a cost to being away from people. The thing I don't miss, though, is the constant pressure. I don't miss the anxiety about whether I'm doing enough, whether I'm successful enough, whether my life means something by some external measure. I don't miss the sense that you have to be constantly productive, constantly building your brand or your career or your resume. There's less of that here. People just live. They have jobs, they have families, they have communities, and that's enough. I also think I've gotten better at being a person. I mean that seriously. Living here, I'm less anxious, I'm more patient, I'm less caught up in status and competition. I feel like I actually know my neighbors as full human beings, with their own lives and problems and joys, not just as faces I see in passing. I'm part of something. That's different from how I lived before. One thing I want to be clear about, this isn't me saying the Philippines is perfect, or that everyone should move here, or that I figured out the secret to happiness or any of that. I'm just saying that for me, at this point in my life, living in Dumaguete, building actual relationships, being part of a community, working remotely so I have the freedom to spend time with people instead of grinding 8 hours a day in an office, that's working. I've thought about whether I'll ever move back to the States, and honestly, I don't know. Maybe when I'm older and need better health care. Maybe if something changes with my family situation. But right now, I can't really see it. Asheville is nice, but it's not home anymore. It feels like a place I'm from, not a place I'm going to. The Philippines is home now, or Dumaguete anyway. It's specific in a way that matters. The last thing I want to mention is just the freedom aspect. I came here originally because I could work remotely, and that was the mechanism that let me stay and explore. And that's been real. The ability to make USD and spend PHP is a huge advantage. But I also think that the freedom I've found here is deeper than just the financial thing. I have the freedom to not optimize every moment of my life. I have the freedom to have long conversations with friends without checking my watch. I have the freedom to spend a Saturday doing nothing, just sitting on my balcony reading or watching the water. I have the freedom to say no to things that don't matter to me. I have the freedom to be bored sometimes, which sounds weird, but boredom is something we've kind of engineered out of Western culture, and I think we're worse off for it. That freedom feels rare and precious. So yeah, I've been to 43 countries. They were all incredible in different ways, but I live in Dumaguete because it's the place where I can actually live. Not just pass through, not just collect experiences, but actually be part of something real. It's the place where a stranger calls me sir with genuine warmth. It's the place where my neighbor brings me food, and my friends make space for me at the basketball court, and my landlord fixes things without me asking. It's the place where after years of moving around, I finally stopped. And that's the real story.